SUA, apologize to Brenda or leave. Those were the words my son said to me in front of 23 people gathered around his dining room table. And for a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard him. The room fell silent so quickly that even the sound of silverware against china stopped. Everyone looked at me. My daughter-in-law, Olivia, sat beside her mother, Brenda Collins, with her arms folded across her chest. Christmas lights glowed softly along the walls of the dining room. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air. Just minutes earlier, everyone had been laughing. Now it felt as though all the warmth had been pulled from the room. I stood there holding a serving bowl of mashed potatoes, trying to understand how a simple family dinner had turned into this. My name is Patricia Morgan. I am 68 years old, a widow, and the mother of the man who had just given me an ultimatum in front of his entire family. The argument had started over something so small it seemed ridiculous. Brenda had spent most of the evening criticizing everything from the holiday decorations to the food. I had ignored it, just as I had ignored countless comments over the years. But when she looked at a framed photograph of my late husband sitting on a shelf nearby and referred to him as ancient history, I quietly said that some memories deserved respect. That was all. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult her. I simply defended the memory of the man I had loved for 43 years. Brenda immediately acted offended. Olivia rushed to her mother's side. And somehow, within 10 minutes, I became the problem. Daniel pushed his chair back and stood. He looked uncomfortable, but not uncertain. That was the part that hurt most. He had already chosen a side. "Mom," he said, "you upset Brenda. You need to apologize." I stared at him. For what? For being disrespectful. The words felt unreal. Around the table, relatives avoided eye contact. A few stared down at their plates. Others looked toward Brenda, who sat there wearing the expression of someone waiting to receive justice. I suddenly realized this was not about one comment. It was about years of accumulated expectations. Years of being asked to stay quiet. Years of making myself smaller so everyone else could stay comfortable. Daniel took a step toward me. Either apologize or leave. The sentence landed harder than anything Brenda had said all evening. Not because it came from anger. Because it came from my son. The little boy whose scraped knees I bandaged. The teenager whose college applications I stayed up all night helping him complete. The young man I supported after his father died unexpectedly. I looked at him and searched for some sign that he understood what he was asking. I found none. The room remained silent. Even Olivia looked surprised by how far things had gone. Then I looked at Brenda. For the first time all evening, she smiled. It was a small smile. Brief. But I saw it. In that moment, something inside me settled. The hurt did not disappear. The disappointment did not vanish. But the confusion ended. I finally understood where I stood. I placed the serving bowl carefully on the table. I picked up my purse from the chair. Then I looked directly at Daniel and spoke 3 words. "You chose her." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence felt endless. Daniel's face changed immediately. He looked as though he wanted to respond, but no words came. Perhaps because he knew I was right. Perhaps because deep down he had known it for years. I slipped on my coat. The same coat my husband bought me for our last anniversary together. As I walked toward the front door, I heard Olivia call my name softly. I kept walking. Outside, cold winter air greeted me. Snowflakes drifted beneath the glow of the porch light. Behind me, through the dining room window, I could still see everyone frozen around the table. Brenda, Olivi. The drive home felt longer than usual. Christmas lights blurred past my windshield while snow drifted across the empty roads. Every intersection seemed wrapped in memories. For years, I had spent holidays making sure everyone else felt comfortable. I cooked. I hosted. I remembered birthdays, anniversaries, and school events. Yet somehow I had become the person expected to apologize for defending the memory of my husband. By the time I pulled into my driveway, exhaustion sat heavy in my chest. My house greeted me with silence. The small Christmas tree in the living room still glowed softly beside the window. A few wrapped gifts remained beneath it, waiting for family members who now seemed very far away. I hung up my coat and placed my purse on the kitchen counter. For a moment, I simply stood there. The quiet felt strange after the crowded dining room. I made myself a cup of tea and settled into my favorite chair. Across the room sat a photograph of Daniel at age 10, smiling proudly beside a bicycle we could barely afford at the time. I remembered working extra shifts to save for it. I remembered the way he hugged me Christmas morning. Back then, I never imagined a day would come when my own son would ask me to choose between my dignity and his approval. Around 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. A few seconds later, it stopped. Then another call came. I ignored that one too. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Some conversations require distance before they can happen honestly. A voicemail notification appeared moments later. I listened to it without hesitation. "Mom, please call me back," Daniel said. His voice sounded strained. "Things got out of hand. I just want to talk." I deleted nothing. I saved the message and placed the phone face down on the table. 20 minutes later it rang again. This time the caller was someone I did not expect. Emma, my 14-year-old granddaughter. I answered immediately. "Hi, sweetheart." Relief flooded her voice. "Grandma, thank goodness. What is wrong?" A pause followed. Then she lowered her voice. "Everybody is arguing." I closed my eyes. "About tonight?" "About a lot of things." She sounded nervous. "Dad and Mom are fighting. Grandma Brenda is upset. Nobody is acting normal." I leaned back in my chair. "You should not have to deal with that." "I know." Another pause. "Grandma." "Yes. You were right." The word surprised me. "About what?" "Dad always chooses the easiest person to agree with." Silence filled the line for several seconds. Then Emma continued. "He never wants anyone upset with him." Her observation felt painfully accurate. Even as a child, she had seen something I spent years ignoring. "Why are you calling me?" I asked gently. "Because there is something you should know." My grip tightened around the phone. "What is it?" Emma hesitated. "I was upstairs earlier looking for wrapping paper." Her voice dropped even lower. I heard Grandma Brenda talking to Mom. A knot formed in my stomach. "Talking about what?" "About you." I stared at the Christmas tree across the room. "What did they say?" Another long pause followed. Grandma Brenda said tonight was supposed to happen sooner. The room suddenly felt colder. "What do you mean?" Emma swallowed audibly. "She said your dad should have stopped letting Patricia influence family decisions years ago." Hearing my own first name instead of Grandma hurt more than it should have. "Did she say anything else?" "She said now that everybody finally sees where they stand, things can move forward." I felt something shift inside me. Not shock. Not even anger. Recognition. The dinner had not been a spontaneous disagreement. It had been part of something larger. Something that had been developing quietly for a long time. Emma continued speaking. "Mom told her not to worry because everything was almost settled." "Settled?" I repeated. That was the word she used. I looked toward the framed photograph of my husband. Suddenly, dozens of small moments from the past several years rearranged themselves in my mind. Conversations cut short when I entered a room. Decisions announced after they were already made. Brenda's growing influence over matters that had nothing to do with her. None of it seemed accidental anymore. "Grandma," Emma asked softly, "are you okay?" I took a slow breath. "Yes, sweetheart." And surprisingly, it was true. Because for the first time, pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together. "Thank you for telling me." "You are not mad?" she asked. "No," I smiled sadly. "Sometimes the truth is a gift, even when it hurts." After we ended the call, I sat alone beside the Christmas tree for a long time. Snow continued falling outside. The house remained quiet, but my mind was no longer focused on the argument at dinner. It was focused on one question. If tonight was supposed to happen sooner, what exactly had they been preparing for all these years? The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still dark, and for several minutes I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Emma's words. Tonight was supposed to happen sooner. The sentence echoed through my mind like a puzzle piece that belonged somewhere I could not quite see. Eventually, I got up and made coffee. Snow covered my backyard in a smooth white blanket. Everything looked peaceful. Yet beneath that calm surface, I could feel old memories beginning to stir. Sometimes the truth does not arrive all at once. Sometimes it hides inside moments you dismissed years earlier. As I sat at the kitchen table, I found myself remembering the first time I met Brenda Collins. Daniel had been dating Olivia for less than a year. We all met at a restaurant downtown. At the time, I wanted to make a good impression. I remember complimenting Olivia's career and asking about her family. Brenda spent most of the evening talking about herself, her travels, her opinions, her accomplishments. I remember noticing that she interrupted people frequently, but I brushed it aside. Every family has different personalities. Looking back, I realized something else. Brenda never asked a single question about me. Not one. The memory seemed insignificant until another surfaced. 3 years later, during Emma's 10th birthday party, I had volunteered to organize games for the children. Halfway through the afternoon, Brenda announced that everyone should gather for family photographs. When the pictures were posted online later that week, I noticed I appeared in only one of them. At the time, I assumed it was coincidence. Now I was no longer sure. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text message from Daniel appeared. "Can we talk today?" I stared at it for several seconds before placing the phone back down. I was not ready. Not yet. Too many questions remained unanswered. Instead, I opened an old storage cabinet in the hallway and began sorting through family albums. If there truly had been a pattern, I wanted to see it clearly. Hour after hour, I turned pages. Holidays, graduations, summer cookouts, birthdays. The evidence was subtle but undeniable. In earlier years, I stood beside Daniel in almost every picture. Then gradually, I drifted farther away. One row back, then near the edge, then sometimes absent entirely. Nobody would notice the change unless they looked across 15 years at once. I did. By lunchtime, my dining room table was covered with photographs. I stood over them feeling both sad and strangely relieved. Sad because the pattern was real. Relieved because I was no longer imagining it. Then my phone rang. This time it was Emma. "Grandma." Her voice sounded nervous. "What happened?" I asked immediately. "Nothing bad," she said quickly. "I just remembered something." I listened carefully. "Do you remember last summer when Mom canceled your invitation to our lake weekend?" "Yes." Olivia had claimed the rental house reached maximum capacity. "Well," Emma said softly, "there were 2 empty bedrooms." I closed my eyes. Another piece. Another explanation falling apart. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I think you deserve to know the truth." Her answer nearly broke my heart. A 14-year-old should not feel responsible for correcting the mistakes of adults. Yet here she was, trying to do exactly that. After the call ended, I returned to the photographs. Then I noticed something unexpected. Tucked inside one album was a folded piece of paper. At first, I thought it was an old receipt. Instead, it turned out to be a seating chart from a family anniversary dinner held 2 years earlier. I studied it carefully. My name had been written in one location and then crossed out. Beside it, another note appeared in different handwriting. "Move Patricia to secondary table." I stared at those words for a long time. Secondary table. The phrase felt strangely familiar. Suddenly, memories rushed back. The anniversary dinner. The awkward seat near the back corner. Brenda sitting beside Daniel and Olivia at the main table. At the time, I told myself it was a simple logistical decision. Now I wondered whether it had been something else entirely. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, my dining room table had become a map of years I thought I understood. And the more pieces I uncovered, the more one uncomfortable truth emerged. The argument at Christmas dinner had not been the beginning of my exclusion. It was simply the first time they stopped hiding it. For the next several days, I found myself looking at old memories differently. It was like discovering that a painting you admired for years contained details hidden beneath the surface. Once you saw them, you could never go back to seeing only the picture you wanted to believe. Every morning, I sat at my dining room table surrounded by photographs, notes, invitations, and old calendars. I was not searching for reasons to be hurt. The hurt had already arrived. I was searching for understanding. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of holiday cards, I came across an envelope from 3 years earlier. It contained an invitation to a family barbecue hosted by one of Daniel's cousins. I remembered that event clearly because I had not attended. Rachel told me the gathering was canceled due to bad weather. Curious, I checked the date against several photographs Emma had recently shared. The barbecue had happened exactly as planned. There were smiling faces, picnic tables, children playing in the yard, and Daniel standing beside Rachel and Brenda. I was not there because nobody had told me the truth. I sat back in my chair and stared at the photographs for a long time. Then another memory surfaced. A Mother's Day brunch 2 years earlier. Rachel had called the night before and explained that reservations were limited. She promised we would celebrate together another day. That other day never came. At the time, I accepted the explanation without question. Now I wondered how many similar explanations I had accepted simply because I trusted my family. The realization was painful, but it also brought clarity. Trust had never been the problem. The problem was that trust had not been respected. Later that evening, my phone rang again. It was Daniel. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. Hello. The relief in his voice was immediate. Mom. We both fell silent. Neither of us seemed certain where to begin. Finally, he spoke. I know you are upset. I looked around my quiet living room. Upset is not the word I would use. Another silence followed. I never wanted things to become like this, he said. Then why did they? The question lingered between us. Daniel sighed heavily. Because every time I thought I should say something, I convinced myself it was not important enough. His answer sounded familiar. Too familiar. Small moments. Small compromises. Small silences. One by one they had built a wall between us. And now? I asked. Now I think I was wrong. I appreciated the honesty, but honesty arriving years late still carries consequences. After we ended the call, I walked through the house turning off lights before bed. As I passed the hallway closet, I noticed an old storage box I had not opened in years. Inside were school projects Daniel made as a child. Handmade Mother's Day cards. Drawings. Report cards. Simple treasures every parent saves. One card caught my attention immediately. Daniel had made it in 3rd grade. The front showed a stick figure version of me wearing a crown. Inside, written in oversized pencil letters, were the words, "My mom always stands up for what is right." I sat on the floor holding that card for several minutes. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. Not because of what Daniel had become, because of who he once was. Somewhere beneath the pressure, the avoidance, and the bad decisions, that boy still existed. The question was whether he would ever find his way back. The following afternoon brought another unexpected visitor. Emma arrived carrying a small folder. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and slid it toward me. "What is this?" I asked. "Things I think you should see." Inside were printed emails, family schedules, and notes she had quietly collected over time. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, but together they painted a picture that could no longer be ignored. Again and again, plans had been adjusted after Brenda became involved. Again and again, family decisions shifted in ways that reduced my presence. It was subtle, careful, almost invisible unless viewed all at once. I closed the folder and looked at Emma. "You have been carrying this for a long time, haven't you?" She nodded. I just did not know what to do. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing." That night, as snow drifted softly outside my windows, I realized something important. For years I believed I was losing my place in the family because time changes everything. But time had not caused this. Choices had. And once I understood that difference, I also understood something else. If choices created the problem, choices could expose it. And somewhere ahead, whether Daniel realized it or not, a moment was coming when everyone would have to decide exactly where they stood. 3 days later, I received a phone call that changed the direction of everything. It came from an attorney I had not spoken with in nearly 4 years. His name was Richard Hale, and he had helped my husband and me organize several legal and financial matters long before Daniel married Olivia. When I answered, his voice sounded warm but unusually cautious. "Patricia, I hope I am not calling at a bad time." "Not at all," I replied. "What can I do for you?" A brief silence followed. "Actually, I think the better question is what can I do for you?" My grip tightened slightly around the phone. "What do you mean?" Richard hesitated before continuing. "Someone contacted my office last month asking questions about several family assets." I sat up straighter. "Who?" "I cannot discuss every detail," he said carefully. "But I can tell you the inquiry did not come from you." The room suddenly felt very quiet. "And?" I asked. And the questions suggested certain assumptions that are not accurate. I stared out the window at the snow-covered backyard. Assumptions about what? Ownership, authority, future transfers. His words were measured and professional, but I could hear concern beneath them. "Patricia, I thought you should know because some of the questions implied that decisions had already been made." I thanked him for calling and ended the conversation a few minutes later. Then I sat alone in my kitchen trying to process what I had just learned. Emma's documents, the old photographs, the missed invitations, the comments from Brenda, and now legal inquiries based on assumptions about things that were not even true. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. This was not simply about family gatherings anymore. Something larger sat beneath the surface. That evening, Emma arrived carrying a backpack and a worried expression. The moment she stepped inside, I knew something was bothering her. What happened? I asked. She hesitated before sitting at the kitchen table. Dad and Mom have been talking a lot lately. About me? I asked. She nodded. About you. About Grandpa's property. About future plans. I remained silent. Grandma Brenda keeps saying everything will be easier once certain things are settled. The phrase sounded familiar. Too familiar. Have they said anything specific? Emma shook her head. Not really. But every time your name comes up, the room gets quiet. I poured her a cup of hot chocolate and sat across from her. She looked exhausted. Far too burdened for a 14-year-old. You do not have to carry this alone, I told her gently. Her eyes filled with emotion. I just do not like what is happening. Neither did I. But unlike Emma, I had started to understand why it was happening. Over the following week, more pieces appeared. None of them dramatic. None of them shocking by themselves. A casual comment from a relative. An email forwarded by mistake. A conversation abruptly ending when I entered a room during a family gathering. Each piece was small. Together, they formed a picture. Brenda had spent years positioning herself at the center of family decisions. Not through force. Through influence. Through repetition. Through the simple act of always being present when choices were made. And Daniel, eager to avoid conflict, had slowly allowed it to happen. One afternoon, while organizing paperwork in my home office, I opened a drawer containing correspondence from my husband. Most of it involved ordinary matters. Insurance records, property documents, investment notes. Then I found a handwritten letter addressed to me. I recognized his handwriting instantly. My heart tightened. The letter had been written only months before he passed away. I sat down and began reading. The words were simple, practical, loving. Near the end, one sentence caught my attention immediately. If there ever comes a day when people mistake your kindness for weakness, remember that you help build everything they stand on. I read the sentence 3 times. Then a fourth. It felt as though he were speaking directly into the moment I was living. For years, I had mistaken patience for peace. I thought staying silent protected the family. I thought avoiding conflict preserved relationships. Now I was beginning to understand something important. Silence does not always create harmony. Sometimes it simply creates space for unhealthy behavior to grow. That evening, as the winter sun disappeared behind the trees, my phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. It contained only 6 words. Mom, we need to talk soon. I looked at the screen for several seconds. Then I set the phone down beside my husband's letter. For the first time since Christmas dinner, I felt completely calm. Because whatever conversation was coming, I was no longer walking into it confused. I finally understood the game being played around me. And understanding changes everything. 2 days later, Daniel finally came to my house. I saw his truck pull into the driveway just after noon. Through the front window, I watched him sit behind the wheel for nearly a minute before getting out. That hesitation told me more than any apology ever could. He looked tired when I opened the door. Not physically tired. Emotionally tired. Like a man who had spent too long trying to balance opposing versions of reality. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table where I had spent weeks sorting photographs, letters, and memories. For a while neither of us spoke. Then Daniel noticed the letter from his father resting beside a folder of documents. I remember that handwriting, he said softly. So do I. Silence settled over the room again. Finally, he looked at me and said the words I had been waiting to hear. You were right. I did not respond immediately. I wanted him to continue. About what? I asked. Daniel stared down at his hands. About me choosing her. The admission seemed to cost him something. For years I convinced myself I was being fair. I told myself I was keeping everyone happy. He laughed bitterly. The truth is I was just avoiding difficult conversations. I listened without interruption. Every time Mom Brenda complained, I tried to smooth things over. Every time Olivia wanted something, I found a reason to agree. Every time you looked hurt, I told myself it would get better next time. He shook his head slowly. There was always a next time. I thought about the countless holidays, birthdays, and family dinners that now looked different through the lens of truth. Why are you here, Daniel? I asked. He met my eyes. Because things are falling apart. The honesty surprised me. What do you mean? Olivia and Brenda are arguing now. He leaned back heavily. Once I stopped automatically agreeing with everything, they started arguing with each other. I almost smiled. Not because I enjoyed their discomfort, Because unhealthy systems often depend on one person refusing to question them. Emma has been talking to me, I said. Daniel nodded immediately. I know. She has seen more than you realize. His expression darkened. That is what scares me. For several seconds we sat in silence. Then he reached into his jacket and removed a folded packet of papers. There is something else you should see. I opened the documents carefully. Most were emails. Others were notes from discussions involving future family plans. As I read, a clearer picture emerged. Brenda had been encouraging conversations about property, finances, and family influence for years. Not directly, not openly, always through suggestions, questions, concerns, small comments repeated often enough to become assumptions. Daniel watched my face as I turned each page. I should have stopped it sooner, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. He nodded. I know. What struck me most was not the content itself. It was the pattern. Brenda rarely demanded anything. She simply positioned herself as the most important voice in the room until everyone else adjusted around her, including Daniel, including Olivia. Eventually, even I had adjusted without realizing it. What does Olivia think now? I asked. Daniel sighed. She is starting to realize her mother has been influencing more than she understood. Another silence followed. Then he said something unexpected. Emma refuses to spend weekends at Brenda's house anymore. I looked up immediately. Why? Because she says she is tired of hearing people talk about family while treating family members badly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of pride beneath the sadness. Emma had inherited something valuable. The ability to recognize truth even when it was uncomfortable. Before leaving, Daniel stood near the front door and hesitated. Mom. Yes. His voice cracked slightly. Do you think we can fix this? I looked at him for a long moment. Outside, snow was melting beneath a pale winter sun. The season was changing, even if slowly. I think honesty can fix a lot of things, I said. But only if people are willing to live with the truth afterward. Daniel nodded. He seemed to understand exactly what I meant. After he left, I returned to the kitchen table and looked through the documents one more time. The pieces were almost all there now. The years of exclusion, the influence, the assumptions, the silence. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why had Brenda worked so hard to position herself at the center of decisions that were never hers to make? And as I sat there studying the papers spread before me, I had a feeling the answer was closer than ever. The answer arrived from a place I never expected. A week after Daniel visited, Richard Hale called again. His tone was different this time, more direct. Patricia, I found something while reviewing older files. I sat down immediately. What kind of something? A pattern. He paused. And I think you need to see it. The following afternoon, I met him at his office. Richard placed a thin folder on the desk between us. At first glance it looked ordinary. Copies of correspondence. Notes from meetings. A few dated records. Then he pointed to several entries highlighted in yellow. Notice the dates. I studied them carefully. Over the course of 6 years, there had been multiple requests for information regarding my estate plans, property arrangements, and investment structures. None of the requests came from me. Several came from Olivia. Others came from advisors she contacted independently. A surprising number referenced questions that originated with Brenda. My stomach tightened. She has been asking about these things for years? Richard nodded. Not constantly, just often enough to keep track of changes. I looked down at the documents again. What struck me was not greed. It was planning. Deliberate, patient planning. Brenda had not been interested in a single decision. She had been interested in influence. The ability to shape expectations long before facts were available. Richard folded his hands. Patricia, there is something else. He handed me another document. This one was older, nearly 4 years old. It summarized a meeting I vaguely remembered attending. During that meeting, my husband and I had finalized several protective provisions regarding family assets. Reading the notes now, I realized something important. Most of the assumptions Brenda seemed to be operating under were incorrect. She believed future authority would eventually pass through Daniel in a very specific way. It would not. Not unless I chose it. Richard watched quietly as I read. Do you understand why this matters? He asked. I nodded slowly. Because someone has been making plans around information that was never true. Exactly. When I returned home that evening, I found Emma waiting on my porch. The moment she saw my face, she knew something had happened. What did you learn? She asked. We settled into the living room. and I shared only the parts appropriate for her age. Even then, her expression grew serious. So Grandma Brenda thought she knew how everything would work. It appears that way. Emma shook her head. She acts like she knows everything. The comment made me smile despite myself. Then her expression changed. Grandma, there is one more thing. I had heard those words often enough lately to know they mattered. What is it? Last night, Mom and Grandma Brenda had another argument. I remained silent. Mom said she was tired of being told what to do. That caught my attention immediately. Really? Emma nodded. I have never heard her talk like that before. For years, Olivia had followed her mother's lead almost automatically. The idea that she was finally questioning that influence felt significant. What happened next? I asked. Grandma Brenda said she was only trying to protect the family. Emma rolled her eyes. Then Mom asked who exactly she was protecting. The room fell quiet. That question lingered in my mind long after Emma stopped talking. Who exactly was she protecting? Over the next few days, pieces continued falling into place. Daniel called more often. Olivia sent a brief message apologizing for Christmas. It was not a complete apology, but it felt sincere. Meanwhile, Brenda became increasingly isolated. Not because anyone attacked her, because people had finally started asking questions. Questions are difficult for manipulation to survive. One evening, Daniel visited again. This time he looked calmer, more certain. Mom, he said, there is going to be a family meeting next weekend. I studied his expression carefully. And everyone is coming. He hesitated, including Brenda. I leaned back in my chair. What is the purpose of the meeting? Daniel took a deep breath. To clear the air. The phrase almost made me laugh. There was far more than air that needed clearing. Yet I understood what he meant. For years, important conversations had been avoided. Now they were unavoidable. As Daniel prepared to leave, he stopped at the front door. I should have listened sooner. I looked at my son and saw genuine regret in his eyes. Maybe, I said softly. But listening now is better than never listening at all. After he left, I stood by the window watching snow melt beneath the streetlights. Winter was slowly giving way to spring. And for the first time since that Christmas dinner, I sensed the balance shifting. Not because anyone had won. Not because anyone had lost. But because the truth no longer needed permission to exist. And at the upcoming family meeting, everyone would finally have to face it. The family meeting took place the following Saturday afternoon at Daniel's house. The same house where everything had finally come into the open months earlier. As I parked in the driveway, I noticed several familiar vehicles already there. Relatives had arrived. Olivia's brother, a few cousins, even an aunt who rarely attended family gatherings anymore. Through the front window, I could see people moving around the living room. The atmosphere felt different from previous family events. Quieter, more cautious. Nobody was pretending everything was normal. When I stepped inside, conversations softened. Not because people were hostile, because everyone understood why we were there. Daniel greeted me first. Mom. Daniel. He looked nervous, but determined. That alone was a significant change. Olivia approached next. For a moment, she seemed unsure what to say. Then she offered a small smile. Thank you for coming. Of course. Across the room sat Brenda. She occupied her usual chair near the center of the gathering, but something had changed. For the first time since I met her, she did not appear completely confident. She looked uncomfortable, almost defensive. We all settled into our seats. Coffee cups rested on tables. Family photographs lined the shelves. The setting felt ordinary. Yet everyone knew this was not an ordinary afternoon. Daniel stood first. I asked everyone here because there have been problems in our family for years. His voice shook slightly. Problems I helped create by refusing to address them. The room remained silent. Nobody interrupted. I spent too much time avoiding difficult conversations, he continued. And when you avoid problems long enough, they grow. He glanced toward me, then toward Olivia. That ends today. I felt a quiet sense of pride. Speaking honestly had never come easily to my son. Next, Olivia spoke. She looked directly at me. Patricia, I owe you an apology. The room seemed to hold its breath. For years, I allowed assumptions and influences to affect my judgment. I convinced myself certain things were normal when they were not. Tears filled her eyes. I should have defended you more often. I should have listened more carefully. And I am sorry. I believed her. Not because the apology was perfect, because it was sincere. Then all eyes turned toward Brenda. For several seconds, she said nothing. Finally, She folded her hands in her lap. I suppose everyone expects me to say something. Nobody responded. Brenda sighed. I always believed I was helping. The statement sounded familiar. It was the same explanation people often use when confronted with uncomfortable truths. Helping whom? I asked quietly. Brenda looked at me. For a moment, I thought she might argue. Instead, her shoulders dropped slightly. Perhaps that is the question I should have asked myself years ago. The honesty surprised everyone, including me. She stared down at the floor. I like being needed. I like being consulted. And over time, I stopped noticing the difference between offering advice and controlling situations. No one spoke. The room remained completely still. Brenda looked around at the family gathered there. I convinced myself I knew what was best. Her voice softened. That was not always true. It was not a dramatic confession. There were no raised voices. No emotional outbursts. Just a simple acknowledgement of reality. And somehow, that felt more powerful. Later, as conversations became less tense, relatives began sharing observations of their own. Small stories, small memories, moments that seemed insignificant individually but revealed patterns when viewed together. What struck me most was how many people had noticed something was wrong without fully understanding it. They had seen the distance growing. They simply did not know why. As the afternoon continued, the atmosphere gradually changed. The tension that had hung over the family for years seemed to loosen. Not disappear completely. Healing takes time, but loosen enough for people to breathe again. Before leaving, Emma sat beside me on the couch. You know what? She said. What? I think this is the first family meeting where people actually told the truth. I laughed softly. You might be right. She smiled. It feels better. As the gathering ended and people prepared to leave, Daniel walked me to my car. The sun was beginning to. Spring arrived slowly that year. Snow melted from sidewalks. Trees began showing hints of green. The world outside moved forward one quiet day at a time, and eventually our family began doing the same. Not perfectly, not all at once, but forward nonetheless. Several months after the family meeting, I found myself sitting on a park bench watching Emma play with her younger cousins during a weekend picnic. The air smelled of fresh grass and sunshine. Families spread blankets across the lawn. Children chased one another between trees. It felt ordinary in the best possible way. Daniel sat beside me holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. You know, he said, handing me one. I used to think being a good son meant keeping everyone happy. I smiled faintly. That sounds exhausting. He laughed. It was. Then his expression became more serious. I finally understand that avoiding conflict is not the same thing as creating peace. I looked at him carefully. That is a lesson many people never learn. He nodded. I almost did not. Across the field, Emma waved enthusiastically. I waved back. Watching her laugh with the rest of the family felt different now. Lighter. More natural. The tension that once hovered over every gathering had gradually faded. Not because everyone agreed on everything. Because people had finally stopped pretending problems did not exist. A few weeks later, Olivia invited me to lunch. It was the first time we had spent time together without anyone else present in years. We met at a small cafe near downtown. At first, the conversation stayed comfortably neutral. Weather, Emma's school activities, community events. Then Olivia placed her coffee cup down and looked directly at me. I need to tell you something. I waited. For a long time, I thought loyalty meant always supporting my mother. She stared out the window briefly. I never realized that loyalty without honesty can become something unhealthy. The admission was sincere, difficult, earned. We all learn lessons at different times, I said gently. Her eyes filled with emotion. I wish I had learned that one sooner. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. There was nothing else to say. Some apologies become meaningful not because of the words themselves, but because of the growth behind them. As for Brenda, she remained part of the family, though her role changed. She no longer positioned herself at the center of every decision. She no longer assumed influence where it had not been invited. The transformation was not immediate. Old habits rarely disappear overnight. But little by little, she began listening more and directing less. Surprisingly, that change seemed to bring her a certain peace as well. One afternoon, nearly 6 months after Christmas, she called me unexpectedly. We spoke for almost an hour. At the end of the conversation, she said something I never thought I would hear. Patricia, I spent years trying to prove my value. I remained silent. I should have spent that time building relationships instead. When the call ended, I sat quietly in my living room reflecting on how much had changed. Not just within the family, within myself. For years I had believed patience meant accepting whatever treatment came my way. I thought preserving relationships required endless compromise. What I learned instead was far simpler. Respect cannot survive where honesty does not exist. And dignity is not something other people give you. It is something you choose to keep. The following Christmas arrived faster than anyone expected. Once again, family gathered at Daniel and Olivia's house. Once again, lights decorated the windows. Once again, the smell of holiday cooking filled every room. Yet this year felt completely different. As I entered the dining room, my eyes immediately found the table. Every place had been prepared carefully. Every chair was occupied by someone who belonged there. Near the center sat a small card. It simply read, Patricia. Nothing elaborate. Nothing dramatic. Just my name. My place. Emma noticed me looking at it and smiled. I made sure that stayed there, she whispered. I laughed softly and hugged her. Later that evening, as conversation filled the room and laughter echoed through the house, I thought back to the night I walked away after speaking 3 simple words. At the time, I believed I was leaving behind a family dinner. In reality, I was leaving behind something much larger. Years of silence. Years of self-doubt. Years of accepting less than I deserved. Sometimes walking away is not the end of a story. Sometimes it is the beginning of one. And as I looked around the table at the people I loved, I realized the greatest victory was never proving anyone wrong. It was remembering who I was before anyone tried to convince me otherwise.